The meeting of the Education and Pupil Services Committee will please come to order. The district posted this evening's agenda to board docs at least 24 hours prior to the commencement of this meeting. Is there a motion to approve that previously posted agenda?
So moved.
Are there any amendments to offer?
There are no amendments.
Okay. The agenda has been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Those opposed, please signify by saying I oppose. Those abstaining, please signify by saying I abstain. Motion carried. I will now turn over the Education and Pupil Services Committee agenda to co-chair, Ms. Brittany Williams.
Dr. Kelly and Mr. Marshallek, please begin with an overview of your agenda items for this evening.
Good evening. We have two items tonight. Both are for board action. The first one is the Flexible Instructional Day, or FID plan. Dr. Kelly will review what that plan is and the proposal for the next couple of years for the district. The second agenda item, Dr. Manfrey, along with myself, will provide a summary and a recommendation for the Aronimink reconfiguration to make it a K-5 building for the 24-25 school year. And the last piece is we have one policy tonight for review. So if we're okay, I'll turn it over to Dr. Kelly right away and get started.
Thank you.
So tonight I'll be presenting key components of the new FID plan, or the proposed FID plan. And if approved, this would fall for the next three consecutive school years. So I'll begin by reviewing the agenda. First, I'll review what an FID day is, or what this program is. I'll go into what a FID day will look like in the Upper Darby School District, followed by what it can look like if we need a backup plan. So if our first plan doesn't work, what we would have to do as a result of that. And then just some important reminders for parents and their students if just for success in an FID day. So first, in 2019, the Pennsylvania Department of Education allowed school districts, to deliver an alternative method of instruction known as FID, or a flexible instructional day. That began back in 2019. There were a few iterations of that. And now the plan is that we have to provide an application, or we have to put in an application every 3 years to get a plan reapproved by the state. Each time you put in a plan, the school district is awarded 5 flexible instructional days that can be used throughout the school year. The one piece of this is that if one school needs to go onto an FID day, then that day counts for the entire school district. So say we had a water main break at Bywood, and we had to use a day, it would count as one of those 5 for the entire school district. Like I mentioned before, an FID application must be completed every 3 years for the school district, and it is valid for the next, if approved, is valid for the next 3 consecutive years for the district to use. Again, being awarded 5 days per year. The FID plan must be board approved, and that's why I'm bringing it this evening to you, and hope for a board approval for May. Each year also, my office, along with Mr. Lambert's office and Dr. McGarry's office, we complete a survey, an FID survey, to show how the days were used, the success of those days, the attendance rates of those days, and any input that we can make on improving the plans for the future. For our proposed plan for the next 3 years, this is what our plan would entail. So first, we start with communication. We talk about what the day can look like. We talk about how the communication would look like for our families, and we would send out that information to our families as quickly as possible, letting them know that a flexible instructional day will be used for the following school day or following school days, depending on the emergency closing that we are facing. Students in grades K through 12 will use their district-issued computer. That district-issued computer or Chromebook is connected to all of our applications through ClassLink, and we would use our learning management system, Schoology, to send out the information, or for the courses to be available for the students to partake in for that flexible instructional day. Students would also use Google Meet for the synchronous part of the instructional day, meeting with their teacher when their teacher sends out their plan. And there's a lot of communication. Sorry to back up a little bit. There's a lot of communication when it comes to a flexible instructional day. So both the district will be communicating, the buildings would be communicating, and the teachers would be communicating. The teacher would talk about how that Google Meet would work for their students, and how the asynchronous instruction would take place. And lessons for that day would be synchronous and asynchronous, depending on the content and what the students would have to do. Students during the FID day would follow their daily schedule. And again, that would be reiterated by the teacher of when they would have to meet and what it would look like. If that plan would not work, so if we didn't have access to, let's say, power at the time or internet or something of that nature, or we needed to go into an alternative method, then we would still communicate with the families to let them know what type of plan we would be using. The key piece here was, instead of having that asynchronous option, let's say we all couldn't get on at the same time, then we would go into an asynchronous option for our classes and our coursework. And it would be submitted again through Schoology, but when the student could, before the end of the school day or before the end of the day, as noted by the plan that we would implement. So students would have a little bit more flexibility if they are not able to log on synchronously. Again, this would be our backup plan if the synchronous instruction would not be working on a given day. Again, it would be communicated. This is very similar to the plan that we used during our flexible instructional day during this school year, the 23-24 school year. The next piece, just some reminders for successful implementation of an FID day. The first piece being that having that charged, or having your Chromebook home each night and making sure that it's charged so that we can anticipate that it needs to be used. That's a big piece. We should anticipate that during this school year, the 24-25 school year, where this plan would go into place, that we would be using FID days in place of snow days. The second piece of this would be that the district, students should be and must be using the district issued computers. This is important because of the applications that are loaded into ClassLink. It's the way for the students to get in. They're attached to their profiles already. So it's important that they would be using their own Chromebooks that are issued by the school district. And then just the next piece is that all assignments and materials are assigned through Schoology. And those assignments must be submitted at the correct time so that the teacher can make sure that attendance is taken and make sure that the coursework is done so they can start planning for any future lessons based on that lesson that they completed that day. So there's some successful implementation tips. Again, this plan, if implemented, would, or if approved, would then be submitted to the state. From the state, once we apply and send it to the state, the state should let us know by August 1st if the plan was approved. If the plan is approved, then we can provide further guidance, and during our back to school nights, make sure that teachers are sharing this information with their families, as well as my team, making sure that the teachers are all prepared for if we need to go into a flexible instruction. So that is it for this presentation. Are there any questions on an FID day?
Minor question. You gave an example of a water main break at Bywood. If Bywood has to close for more than one day due to the water main break, is that one occurrence of a flexible instructional day, or is it a different occurrence for each day that Bywood is closed?
We would have to use 2 flexible instructional
Okay,
days
so
if it was
it's one
correct.
occurrence.
So it would be
for
2
each
days
day.
of instruction that would use an alternate method of delivering the instruction.
Okay, thank you.
If we go back to slide 6, because I anticipate a lot of kids emailing me tonight if they're listening, or we'll get out of all the things we presented tonight. The snow days will be the thing I get contacted over. Really good question, Board Member Desnoyers. I think there's a point of clarity here that we talked about in other meetings, and I think it's important for us. Act 80, the number of hours and days in a school year, they're important. And so there's two ways to answer your question. One, it could be a flexible instructional day, or it could be a day that we don't have to make up if we had the appropriate hours and days. Where it gets complicated here in the district is there are different areas of concern. Students who participate in the county career and technical education program, the AM and PM hours and their calendar of days have to be accounted for. AM and PM kindergarten are concerns. So in this situation, we are saying to anticipate that there will be no snow days because you have to meet one of the two, either the days or the hours in person. If you have enough hours, you don't have to worry about that day. You could say the water main break and it's a day off because we know the hours are going to exceed where it is. What we are anticipating is that we will have to use those days of instructional time because of anticipation of potential bad weather on top of that. So the days and the hours play into this from an Act 80 standpoint. So if you think about it going into next school year, as Mr. Marshall has pointed out, we have 5 days to play with out of the 175 that are there, as we've talked about this previously, right? There's 5 FID days, and we can't fall short of that because then we'll have an hours and day issue.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just wondering how successful was the FID day this year as far as attendance and students that actually completed their work. And then just the second part to that question is, how many students actually take home their laptop charger, et cetera, and charge it at night and use it?
So I'll answer the second question first. We've seen more success in students taking it home. We have been using a lot of homework applications, so students are taking them home. Most of the high school and secondary schools are using Schoology on a regular basis to post their homework and pieces like that. So students are using their devices on a regular basis for homework. So they are taking them home. The key is, though, to take them home, get them charged so that they are coming in the next day, which is a constant reminder. I will tell you, though, that we are just getting done on PSSAs online. Well, now math, we have still science to go, but and I'll tell you that the number of students that remembered their devices just because we kept saying, please bring in your device, please bring in your device, was excellent. We had one bump on the first day, but after we got past that first piece, it was, okay, I remembered, and they were great. So I anticipate as we continue to remind students and we continue to use them, that shouldn't be an issue. The success rate for this school year was pretty good also. We saw good attendance. We saw students turning in their assignments. We shared some of that information, I believe, in some of the weekly reports as we had an FID day. I think one was a Friday. So we did post attendance in the weekly report that we send to the board so that you could see like the attendance was pretty good on those days. So I do think that with constant reminders and checking in, like I said, the key piece to, I think, a successful day is that communication. The earlier we can get that communication out and make sure that the students have what they need, I think the better off we will be.
I just would like to add, I mean, as a parent that went through the FID day on that, it was a snow day, it was very seamless. And the kids, I mean, for my student, she has a computer at home that the school's provided. So she gets one in school and one at home. And she does like all the interventions, Waggle, iExcel, Amira. So, I mean, it's accessible. Hopefully the children are taking heed and the parents are supporting. So are there any further questions? Okay, thank you. We can go to the next agenda item.
Okay, so tonight, Dr. Manfrey and I are going to go through the proposal recommendation for the Aronimink Elementary School reconfiguration. I want to start just by reviewing the agenda, but then also why we're here at this point. We're making this recommendation. We're going to go through tonight, again, a quick review of the special programs, review what it is, why our loving populations are so complex to work with in our buildings, current enrollment trends, projected enrollment trends in those areas in our special programs in particular, staffing, facilities implications, and then of course our recommendation and the process for if it were to be approved for how to reconfigure Aronimink to be a K-5 building through the approval process with PDE. So first, again, we talked about this in February when I presented this initially, but again, a really quick overview of our K-5, in particular K-5 autistic support program. As we talked about, a maximum caseload size of 8 students per teacher, which is a PDE requirement under Chapter 14 of the PA Code. Largely focused on direct instruction and communication skills, behavior adaptations, daily living skills, social skills, but again, a lot of very, very intensive support and teaching within those classrooms, which is why the state also maxed out the caseload size to be 8 students. A really core foundational part of this program is ABA, or Applied Behavior Analysis, verbal behavior techniques, other ways to help students teach them how to use their language appropriately. And again, language is a behavior on how to ask for and to request things so they can, again, pursue those daily living skills further. We have board certified behavior analysis support or analyst supports in our classrooms, and they flow through in helping students and teachers support and work through the verbal behavior techniques in our classrooms in our Primus and Westbrook Park, Stonehurst Hills classrooms. It's has to be a very, very highly structured and predictable school environment, which if you walk into some of our classrooms, you can see it's it has a lot of picture schedules, has a lot of baskets, a lot of elements that the students know where to go get their tools for each day in school. So space is important. Also having other adults in the room, have space for the other adults. So there is a need for space in this area, and it is increasing with our enrollment trends. So currently right now, and again, this was going back to our February presentation, when we're fully staffed at Primus, we have almost 70 students currently in the program in our K-5, or really our K-3 autistic support program at Primus. There are 9 teachers with an average caseload size of almost 7.5 students per teacher. Stonehurst Hills, which is at grades 1 through 5 in autistic support, they currently have 41 students with 5 teachers, an average of 8.2 students. Now, just as a reminder, when we do have a slight overage for caseload, we do assign that to another special ed teacher in the building, so that teacher who has that caseload is not going to be over per PD's requirements. So we do manage it that way within the building, but the student would remain in the classroom. But again, it's an average. And again, Westbrook Park, when fully staffed, there's 24 students, 3 teachers, 8 students is average caseload. So they're at their max right now at this point. Projected for next school year, this is where we come to the situation where we're going to build the reason or the rationale for why we want to reconfigure Aronimink to be a kindergarten through 5th grade building. We need the space to be opened up at the kindergarten center for next school year, potentially. So as we projected it for next school year, we have 69 students coming in that we believe to be pretty accurate coming into to Primus that we know of through early intervention and other trends that we see over the past couple of years. So it would not really impact the number of teachers or caseload size right now compared to what they are right now. Stonehurst Hills is going to have an increase in enrollment. They have a need for another teacher at Stonehurst Hills through the budget process, which I know Mr. Rogers talked about, repurposing some of our current openings to fill this void, and this is one of those recommendations. That would bring them down to an average caseload of 7.6. Westbrook Park, similar situation. They have an increase in caseload or in enrollment, requiring another teacher to be repurposed, which is a current vacancy, into a autistic support teacher at Westbrook Park. Would bring their caseload size down to under the maximum. Now, this is where it gets tricky because we have students who come in for early intervention that we can have our best estimate based on trends and based on what we have right now, that we know of right now. We expect to have about almost 30 kids coming in from early intervention. That number is included in the Primus numbers. However, what we don't really know, but we have a pretty good handle on what we think is going to happen, and this happens year after year, is we have anywhere between 8 to 15 students who are newly identified at our kindergarten center who need autistic support. These are larger students who come from out of the country, potentially, other LEAs, or don't go to school at all. And they come in who are nonverbal, have had no support through early intervention. So we have an obligation under the federal law, the IDEA, to child find, which is to evaluate the students right away if we suspect there's a disability, which is what we do. And then we do then program and place those students in the appropriate program. If this happens next school year, where even if 10 students are identified at the kindergarten center, they can't go to Primus. There's nowhere for them to go. And that's currently where our kindergarten program exists right now. So what we're proposing through this is if we do reconfigure Aronimink to remove 2 sections or 2 classrooms, 4 sections, 2 classrooms from the kindergarten center, move it over to Aronimink, which would be the normal Aronimink catchment area, students who would go to the kindergarten center, who would then go to Aronimink in first grade. That would open up 2 classroom spaces at the K Center, which would allow for 2 sections of autistic support to be at the kindergarten center, which would be a natural catchment area for the Stonehurst Hills 1 through 5 program. And if we have 10 to 15 students, which we expect that to be true, that would then be a perfect match for 2 teachers at the kindergarten center. Kind of talk through this a little bit, but I'll go through this slide again quickly. We have to consider for additional teachers at Stonehurst Hills, Westbrook Park, and potentially 2 at the kindergarten level. But again, this would be part of our repurposing those open positions right now within the budget. We did consider, and we talked about this in February as well, the creation of space at Stonehurst Hills. It wasn't a viable option. We talked about more space at Westbrook Park. Again, not what we need to have happen to have Westbrook Park to become a K-5 building or a K-3 building. One of the only really realistic options is to have 2 kindergarten spaces open up at the kindergarten center, which would then move 2 sections or 2 classrooms, 2 classrooms, 4 sections of kindergarten from the K Center to the new Aronimink Elementary School. So I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Manfrey. He's going to go through the reconfiguration process and the recommendation for Aronimink Elementary School.
Thank you, Mr. Marshall. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for your attention to the presentation this evening. This actually, the plan that Mr. Marshallak is describing is actually coming at a pretty good time for us, considering that the ultimate vision of the school district was that Aronimink was going to be a K-5 school. So we're actually, the vision is coming to fruition that Aronimink Elementary School will be kindergarten through 5th grade. It was always the vision, but just as a reminder, when we opened school this year, the main level of the existing building, not the renovated building or the addition, the main level of the existing building was not completed yet. And therefore, we had to quickly pivot and change our original vision of a K-5 building to a grade 1 to 5 building at Aronimink. So at the end of the day, this is exactly what we had planned. We had planned Aronimink to be a kindergarten through 5th grade building, and that's what we're asking the board ultimately to consider. It will be 5 sections of kindergarten at Aronimink Elementary School. The Aronimink catchment area will include, I'm trying to get away from saying Senko students, Walter Senko students, because they're now Aronimink students, but the former catchment area of Senko students and the current area of kindergarten, who all go currently to the K Center, will go to Aronimink, making Aronimink a K-5 school. Staffing considerations are that we will be moving 2 kindergarten center teachers, and a 0.5 teacher will be added that we will share with Hillcrest Elementary School. Again, through the reassignment of staff based on areas of need that Mr. Rogers was talking about in his budget presentation, we will be able to do that. And of course, Board Policy 206 will need to be revised. If you just a reminder, you're familiar with Board Policy 206. It is about the catchment areas and the streets, where we identify specifically the streets of students and where they will go to school. So that policy, which is an attachment to that policy, will need to be revised. And in terms of moving, just backing up one note, from human resources perspective, moving 2 teachers from the K Center to Aronimink, we will follow what that looks like in the UDEA collective bargaining agreement, the contract, which it specifically spells out how the administration must go about doing that. And then the next slide is just the reconfiguration process, where we would be asking for board approval on May 14th. We'd ask Board President Fields to sign an affirmation statement that the board has passed that plan. And then we would submit the application to PDE. We've done this once before. When you close an elementary school and reconfigure that student body into one school, you have to do a reconfiguration application, which we did when we closed Senko and merged them with Aronimink. And then, as I said before, Policy 206 would have to go through a first and second reading, where we're changing the streets to identify kindergarten students, incoming kindergarten students from the former Senko area, now Aronimink area, and the current Aronimink area. So that's basically the reconfiguration process and the plan for Aronimink Elementary School next year. I think we're happy to field any questions that you may have.
And we did have a conversation, I did send an email to Mr. Disnoyers about discussing this policy at our next policy committee meeting. It'll be coming up again in May and June and potentially August, or some formation of that timeline.
In my read of Policy 206, the actual text of Policy 206 doesn't need to be updated. It's just the attachment, correct?
That's right. Just it's really one column on the attachment to call it K Center to Aronimink for kindergarten.
Okay.
So do we anticipate like more people would be interested in going to Aronimink? That would be more than that we can fill in those 4 sections?
So we're proposing 5 sections for next school year, and that would be keeping it with the pretty low end of our class size guidelines for kindergarten, consistent with other kindergarten programs. If we do see, a couple extra kids do want to enroll because it is the Aronimink school, Mr. Rehack felt pretty comfortable they would not be a burden on his kindergarten sections. Right now, they are a lower number to begin with across our kindergarten programs, but we're keeping it consistent with those other numbers in other buildings.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
Go ahead.
It's based off catchment, though, right? Is it based off catchment?
Yeah, so
That's right.
Go
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay.
Well, and one of the thoughts was, are more students from other maybe non-public schools want to come to Aronimink in kindergarten if they know that it's the Aronimink school? But again, we have a lot of flexibility with 5 sections, and we can take on a couple extra kids per section if we had to.
Right. Okay. So there's a possibility, I guess, that a parent that is in the area might consider going to Aronimink instead of Dots because there's a kindergarten close by. Is kind of what you're speaking to. Okay.
I know most of their programs are full day and ours are half, but I just wondering like, who would trump who? Who would bump who? Or would there be a bumping? Or is it enough space to accommodate anyone who's in that catchment that wants to come?
I'd like to, first of all, I don't think our enrollment projections for the incoming kindergarten are that high. That's first. I think the enrollment projections, and Mr. Lambert's here, and maybe he can speak to it a little bit better, are nowhere near, as far as I know, 122 students. It's more like 100 or less. So through our enrollment projection process, we feel pretty confident that we're going to be able to accommodate all of the students who would be coming to us from those areas, and some flexibility to add additional students if there is additional interest. Just a reminder that if you go to Aronimink Elementary School, you have to live in the Aronimink element, to Mr. Fields' point, I think, you have to live in the Aronimink Elementary School catchment area, whether it be the section in the Bywood Stonehurst area that is formerly of Senko, or the Aronimink section. You have to live in that catchment area to go to that school. So our enrollment we feel pretty comfortable with our enrollment projections.
Thank you. Go ahead.
My question is, okay, so we're bringing the 2K Center teachers over. I'm wondering about the half share with Hillcrest. What was the thinking behind that?
So right now, it's always been the district's goal to kind of eliminate 0.5 teachers. We have 1 left in the school district, and we've been able, through the reassignment process that Mr. Rogers was discussing, get that teacher to full-time, which they are very interested in doing, and share them between Aronimink Elementary School and Hillcrest. Not unprecedented. We currently share mostly in the English language world. Teachers go from one building to the other to teach classes at other buildings, and we build in their travel time, and we make sure that they're accommodated with their prep time and their lunch time as well.
I get it, just not ideal, right? And so that was my
Not
question
perfect, but
behind
if numbers shake out differently from one year to the next, we may be able to make that an easier transition for teachers.
If I could just add to that too, we're trying to eliminate 0.5 jobs, half-time positions, because when somebody goes out or something happens, it's very hard to fill a 0.5 employee. It's also back to the budget conversation tonight, driving this from the superintendent's office with the CFO. We have to be very cautious of overstaffing and overtaxing to fill those positions. So what we're doing, and that was part of the slide with the budget, I'm glad you asked that question, Deborah, is being very cautious about having a teacher with very low numbers or maybe no numbers as a full-time employee, making sure that we are maximizing what we're putting out there efficiencies-wise with the district, given the crisis of staffing and the shortages that are there. My concern in education in the next 2 to 3 years that we're trying to avoid here in Upper Darby is school district's first move will be to increase class sizes when they can't fill the teachers. And we're lucky that we're still figuring out a way to keep the class sizes somewhat manageable. We can come back to the board if board leadership would like us to in the future and next budgets to talk about, I guess to your question, what does that look like from a 0.5 to a 1.0 as far as the numbers of class sizes would be? We could certainly give you an update on that moving forward.
I just wanted to thank you for accelerating the plan for Aronimink to be a K-5 building. It's sort of a passion of mine. But I also am just thrilled that we're going to be able to accommodate the students of the K Center who really have needs. And a lot of times we don't know what they are until they're on our doorstep and in our classrooms. It's just such an important thing for the district. If you've been over there, it shows. So I'm thrilled that this is happening. Thank you.
Okay, can we move to agenda item 3?
Okay, I'll pass it right over to Mr. Desnoyers.
Sure. There's one policy being considered this evening, and as a reminder, the changes being considered will need to be moved forward at this meeting and approved at a subsequent board meeting to take effect. So the one policy we're considering is policy 823, naloxone. This is a brief summary is as follows. This is a new policy for the district, largely following the PSBA model policy for naloxone. As a means of enhancing the health and safety of its students, staff, and visitors, the district may obtain, maintain, and administer doses of an opioid antagonist and other facilities, specifically naloxone, for emergency use to assist a student, staff member, or other individual believed or suspected to be experiencing an opioid overdose at school district activities taking place on school grounds. And I should mention that the plan administration has come up with involves school district staff volunteering to be trained in the recognition of symptoms and administration of naloxone, and that naloxone would be administered only by someone who has gone through this training and is present, during the school day or at a school district activity, and only if that trained person believes there is a opioid overdose situation taking place. So this summary of policy changes is posted to board docs, and the full policy is as well. That concludes my update. Are there any questions from the board?
I have a question. So we're saying that the school nurse is the one to administer it, right? No?
So I'll let Mr. Marshall.
So we can have that conversation with our buildings to see who would be appropriate, the appropriate personnel in the building to be able to do that. As Mr. Desnour has mentioned, you have to be a trained individual who can see that there's a need for that. It can be a nurse, it can be a security officer, it can be, I'm just naming people off the top of my head. It could be a principal. And we have to determine who that person is going to be in the buildings, who's most visible, who has most interaction with the public, and
It's still under review, or you determined it?
It's still under review. Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But we, along with the policy, will become an administrative regulation. I'm assuming, and that'll detail specifically how the ins and outs of how that policy will work in our district buildings.
So will there be multiple people trained, or is it just one person trained? And if so, is there a designation so people will know who the trained persons are?
Very similar to process to our EPI process we have in place. So I would imagine through the administrative regulation, we would note who these people are, and they would be obviously designated that people would know in the building who is trained on how to administer this this medicine if it's necessary. If there's a crisis happening on campus, and someone believes there could be, an overdose happening, of course that person would have to be notified to come assess the situation. Could be. We have to make that decision.
There was a question about in the policy referencing nurses. The referencing of the nurses is the storage and oversight of this on campus. Again, remember, this is something that's being carried around in the public, generally speaking, as an emergency response to people. We are taking a more cautious aspect here on our campus, on our property. But generally speaking, this is administered in the public pretty regularly. We are taking a much different approach as far as who will be trained. And as Board Member Desnoyer said, we do have volunteers that come forward. We have CPR training, but we will make sure that in our policy, our AR, as Ed is saying, that will spell out the training and the process of those selected employees, and certainly have more than one. Desiree, to your point.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Go ahead.
I'm just thinking of liability here. And I see the statement about holding us harmless, anybody who administers this in good faith, but I'm still thinking about liability. So, Kyle, maybe you can speak to that?
Yeah, there are a number of laws on the books that deal with Good Samaritans in this situation that make it so that we're not liable if we essentially find somebody that looks like they've overdosed, and we're trying to address that. So I'm not concerned about liability from this. Did you have anything else to ask? No. Okay.
Just remember, as board members, these policies are your recommendation. Your policies, we oversee them. This did come from board members asking the district to investigate this policy, and obviously Dr. Yerson and Mr. Marshallak did it investigate this, brought this to board member Desnoyers to come to this moment. So this, again, as Neil's done an unbelievable job with policy, and I mean that, this was really orchestrated from kind of a board to the administration to look into it and go back and forth kind of conversation. So good questions, and that's why these committee meetings exist. So thank you.
Do we have any comments from the public at this time? No?
We do not have any comments online.
Okay, thank you. Can we review the agenda, Mr. Marshallak and Dr. Kelly?
Sure. So the first item, excuse me, is a flexible instructional day. This is for board action at the May board meeting. Again, Dr. Kelly went through, what it will look like, the process. I mean, in the event we have to use one of these days for a school closure, inclement weather, etc. Second item is the Aronimink Elementary School reconfiguration. Dr. Manfrey and I went through the process of what it would look like to have Aronimink be a K-5 building for the next school year. And the third one is our policy 23. That's it.
Thank you. Are we comfortable with moving everything forward? Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Brittany. A motion is in order for adjournment of the Education and Pupil Services Committee meeting.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
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 This meeting is adjourned.